Joined now by Rick Broering, the publisher of MusketeerReport.com and Northern Kentucky's radio analyst. Make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you go down there into the corner and hit the subscribe button. And if you're listening to this in audio form, as always, make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Rick, ahead of conference tournament week here for the Big East, we'll talk some Xavier. But before we talk Xavier and their game against Marquette on Thursday afternoon, get a preview of that and maybe some other thoughts from around the Big East. I want to put a bow on Northern Kentucky's season, which came to an end the other night up at Cleveland State. You were there. You were calling the game. Just real quick here for people, because it's been a few days, so people listening probably know what happened and maybe have seen the game and heard me talk about it on the rundown. But just to put in perspective what this season was for NKU and how it ended, what were your overall thoughts there on Northern Kentucky?
Yeah, I mean, Paul, they were a team that found themselves in a tailspin in January. They had lost a bunch of games in a row, and it wasn't looking good for them. And then, like they do every single year, seemingly, February hit, and they turned their season around. They won 7 of their last 9. Then they won a first-round game at home against Detroit Mercy in the first round of the Horizon League tournament. And they went to Cleveland State, a team that they had beaten pretty soundly the last time they had matched up against them. And Cleveland State came out with a pretty good game plan defensively, stifled NKU's offense, and the Norse just couldn't ever really get it going from the outside or anywhere really on the offensive end in that game. And that was really kind of the end of their season. It marks the first time that they haven't reached the semifinals of the Horizon League tournament in the last 6 years. Or it was 6 straight years that they had made it prior to this one, I should say.
So now, as you look forward toward the offseason, obviously going to be some turnover with a very experienced NKU team. But what are some of the biggest question marks that you have heading into NKU's offseason?
Well, I think with every team now, you have to wonder about the transfer portal, right? Especially in the Horizon League level, the best players usually end up getting rated by bigger conferences that have more NIL money to offer. So you have to wonder about that with NKU. They're going to lose Trey Robinson for sure. They're going to lose Josh Dilling for sure. Those guys are out of eligibility. The big question mark is what happens with Sam Vincent? He was out all of last season, or most of last season, due to an ACL injury suffered, but it was suffered after the typical cutoff point for a medical redshirt. So the initial redshirt claim was denied, as it always is from the NCAA when you've played over 30% of games in the season. Now that's an appeal process. They're waiting to see what will happen there. There's also the fact that the NCAA is considering allowing every player 5 years of eligibility. So based on that, it could add some leniency to his case. If they're thinking they might approve that every player gets 5 years of eligibility anyways, maybe he will get that extra year of eligibility. Now, what he said at NKU is anyone's guess, but that is the first big question for NKU is, can you get Sam Vincent back? And then from there, Paul, I think it's Dan Goretzker, the Division II transfer, who really came on at the end of the season in those final games where NKU was playing so well. And I mentioned they had won 7 of their last 9 to end the regular season, or 8 of the last 10 if you factor in that Detroit Mercy win. He was averaging like 16 points per game, shooting over 40% from 3 during that stretch. So that's another question is, will they have Dan Goretzker back next year as well? Then you have some other guys like Akiana Tijere and LJ Wells, Randall Pettis, multiple guys that could form a nice baseline and starting point to build off of for next year's roster.
Okay, let's talk Xavier now. The Musketeers have Marquette on Thursday afternoon at Madison Square Garden. That game will be on Peacock. I talked to Ben Steele earlier today, the beat writer for the for Marquette for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. That interview will come out on Thursday's show. You'll also be able to watch it here on YouTube. I'll publish that. I'll try to get that out on Wednesday. But, Rick, I want to get your thoughts on this matchup as well. Heading into it, a big one for Xavier to potentially, I don't want to say punch their ticket, because I think that's dramatic at this point to say that just beating Marquette would solidly put them in the field. But as we record this here at 7:21 Eastern time on Monday night, Bracket Matrix just updated for Monday. Xavier remains the last team in the field. They are appearing in 75 of the 87 brackets that Bracket Matrix had on today's update, which is a much higher percentage than they had on Sunday afternoon. Starting to see Xavier pop up in more and more brackets. But the flip side of that is that because they're the last team in, they're the first team to get bounced if there is a bid thief. All of that sets the stage for a very highly anticipated game at MSG at 2:30 on Thursday. You and I just got finished doing the Musketeer Report podcast, and one of the things that we talked a lot about was how highly anticipated this game against Marquette will be, and well, how highly anticipated it is by, I know, Xavier fans, but even people around the country. A lot of intrigue for this game for a Marquette team that's sliding right now and a Xavier team that has won 7 in a row. How excited are you for this game, Rick, to be able to watch this one and see what Xavier can do in it? And how do you think Xavier matches up right now with Marquette?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one, Paul, because it's such a meaningful game for Xavier. They really do need this, and I'm not a big proponent of playing your way in via your conference tournament. And I don't think that's necessarily what we're talking about for Xavier, but when the biggest issue with your resume is a 1-8 record in quad one games, and you have the opportunity to push that to 2-8, or maybe 2-9 after the next round if you lose to St. John's, but pick up that second quad one win at a neutral site over Marquette. That's huge for Xavier, especially when they're going to be trying to separate them with some of those other last team in types on the bubble right now. So it's a really important game, but it's also important because Xavier has completely turned their season around by winning their last 7 games to end the regular season. They've got a great wave of momentum that they're riding right now. And I think the combination of the excitement within the Xavier fan base and that behind that team, they've been playing good basketball. They've been fun to watch. And the importance of this game, along with the fact that it's 2:30 on a Thursday. So that's always makes it more fun.
How do you think Xavier matches up right now with Marquette? Because on the season, this series on aggregate was a net even. Xavier lost by 2 at home. Xavier won on the road by 2. Now you go into MSG, you play Marquette for a third time. Marquette's a little banged up right now. How do you think Xavier matches up with the Golden Eagles?
It's a good question because if you remember that last game, it was ugly. Xavier kind of made it that way with their defensive game plan. They took their point guard, Davion McKnight. They put him on a center in Ben Gold for Marquette. He's a pick and pop guy, and he sets a lot of screens. So then what Xavier was able to do was switch Davion McKnight onto Cam Jones, who's Marquette's best driver coming off of ball screens. And there wasn't a big matchup issue now. They were able to kind of turn him back. Davion McKnight got 3 steals, I believe, in that game. He was a big factor on the defensive end by being disruptive. And Xavier slowed Cam Jones down. He only had 11 points in that game. They did a really good job defensively. So I'm really curious to see how that chess match works out this game. Like, what is Xavier going to do this time? Will they stick with that defensive game plan? And if so, Shaka Smart and his coaching staff have been working on a counter for it. So what will that look like? And will that force Xavier to readjust again? And all of that is going to be interesting to watch. It's on a neutral site. There's going to be a lot of energy in the building at Madison Square Garden for this one. So, yeah, I think it's a good matchup. It's going to be a close game, if I had to guess, and I'm really looking forward to watching it.
Xavier finishes the season on a 7-game winning streak. What do you think was the most glaring thing for Xavier that they did well in this winning streak that they can continue and that you can point to in the postseason as, oh yeah, we've already seen it for 7 straight games. This is going to bear itself out now in the conference tournament and potentially the NCAA tournament?
I just think the fact that their defense has become so reliable, Paul. I mean, if you look at them over that stretch of games that we're talking about, they're a top 15 defense in the country in terms of defensive efficiency by Bart Torfik's metric. And I think it really tells you all you need to know about the way they've been playing. They've been cohesive. They've been playing with more toughness. They've been playing for each other. They're unselfish. They're not worried about the results on the offensive end dictating their energy or how they're playing overall. And I think that's always the sign of a good team. And for Xavier, that's the way it's going right now. So for me, that's the biggest part of this turnaround. And it's really kind of been an unexpected part of this year's story too, because I didn't think that this team would be very good defensively, even when they assembled the roster in the offseason and there's nothing but upside ahead of you. And you're saying all the good things about a team. I never expected this team to be very good defensively. So to see them find themselves on that end of the floor, that's been pretty impressive by the players, but also the coaching staff.
Yeah, to your point, since February 10th on Bart Torvik, Xavier is 13th nationally defensively. And it's completely changed what they've been able to do in a lot of games.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you definitely have to give Dante Maddox Jr. a mention too. His offensive ability to go in there and light a team up. It's not every game. It's been inconsistent. He's streaky, but the fact that teams know he's capable of getting off for 5, 6, 7 threes in a game, putting 25 points on you potentially if you're not careful, it definitely changes the way they're guarding Xavier. It's also really helped out guys like Ryan Conwell and Dalen Swain when they're on the floor with him.
Last question for you, Rick, heading into this Big East tournament. Is there anything that you're looking for? Or, you know what? We talked a lot about the Big East. Is there anything just in general with college basketball heading into, these high major conference tournaments this week? Cincinnati will get started today as we're listening to this. That's at 12:30 Eastern time against Oklahoma State. You'll have Kentucky. You'll have Louisville. Dayton's going to play in the A10 tournament. Xavier, obviously, in the Big East. Is there anything that sticks out to you, whether it's in the Big East or in general, that intrigues you this week in particular?
Well, I think from a Big East perspective, I'm really interested to see St. John's over the next 2 weeks because we've talked a lot about St. John's this year. I've been really impressed with Rick Pitino and what he's done with that team. But there is the fact that they're not a good shooting team. And I think everyone has a little bit of a concern that is someone just going to pack it in or muck it up against them? They're not going to be able to make a shot and they get bounced early. Or are they really going to go into the NCAA tournament looking like a buzzsaw and having a chance to make a deep run? I could see it going either way for this group. So I'm really going to have my eye on St. John's, seeing how they handle themselves at Madison Square Garden, and reassess from there when we get to the NCAA tournament.
Rick, enjoy conference tournament week. I'm sure we'll be talking to you next week. Hopefully we'll be talking to you next week, and hopefully everybody's season's still on track, and we can do this before the NCAA tournament. But as always, where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, I'm a big Facebook guy right now. Go to Facebook, look up Rick Broering, my media page there, and also Musketeer Report on Facebook as well.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Enjoy the week.
Thanks, Paul.